What if the parts of you you've been told are too much are actually signs of growth? In today's episode, we're talking about adult development and identity, specifically how women, especially those from multicultural backgrounds, are often navigating invisible expectations at work. If you've ever felt like you had to tone yourself down to be taken seriously, struggled to balance cultural identity with workplace norms, or wondered which version of me is acceptable here, this episode is for you. Because growth isn't about becoming less of who you are, it's about becoming more integrated.
If you've ever felt like you don't fully fit the mold of your workplace culture, you are not alone. Follow us on Facebook at Communication Skills for Working Women. Share this episode with someone navigating identity at work, and leave a review to help more women find this space. You don't need to split yourself into pieces to succeed. You need tools to bring your full self forward. Welcome to Communication Skills for Working Women. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Rose May. Do you find yourself second guessing or avoiding conversations because you're worried about being misunderstood?
You're not alone. On this show, we're sharing tangible tools for assertiveness, emotional resilience, and real life communication wins and fails.
Let's sharpen our communication together. So I have two stories that I'm going to share really quickly. One is really brief and kind of related to this, but kind of not. I was just talking to someone, and it was actually a business setting. We'd never met before, but we were chatting on the phone and just trying to to know each other over the phone. And at the end of our conversation, I mean, we were kind of laughing and we were kikiing, and I was just, it was a good conversation that we were having. And at the end of the conversation, she's like, "Am I being too much?" And I was like, "What?" She's like, "People tell me that I'm being too much, and sometimes I'm afraid I'm being too much." And I was like, "Man, just live your life." Like those who, I don't know, who think you're too much are not for you. Anyway, so as we were like preparing to record this episode, that woman came into my mind, and I just am hoping that she's just living her life and just being her because she was wonderful and talking to her was so lovely.
Do you feel like she was asking that question around work? Like, am I too much professionally? Or do you feel like it was like a real personal, like, am I too much?
It was a little bit of both because we were talking about work and she was very enthusiastic about the work.
Mm. Right.
So, yeah, probably. And I'm sure that's kind of how she lives her life anyway, is just she's just a very enthusiastic person, but it was yeah, what she was the context was she was very enthusiastic about this work we were going to do
Mm.
together. So, and she was she was like, I'm trying not to scare you away. And I was like, what? I was like, you lady, you don't even know. But anyways, it just struck me in that moment that like somebody was asking me if I thought she was too much. And maybe it's just because I don't know, I watch video of myself sometimes and I'm like, I feel like I'm too much,
Mm.
even in my videos. So I'm like, yeah, it was just surprising that someone was asking me if I thought they were too much. Anyway, I didn't. And it was a lovely conversation. It was fine, but it
I think
stuck
too,
out to
at
me.
work, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. I was just saying, yeah, it stuck out to me.
Yeah, I think too at work when like there's different levels of passion around projects too.
Hmm.
And so you said you guys were going to be working on something, and I've definitely worked on things where I've been the more passionate one, and I've had other people who are like willing and they're committed, but definitely not as passionate about it as me. And then I've been on the other side too, where I'm like, I am not the passionate one about it, but I'm willing,
Yeah,
committed, but I appreciate their passion. Like
yeah,
I'm not like, man, they're too much.
yeah. Yeah, that's kind of how I am. I'm like, oh, this person, I'm glad somebody is passionate about that. Like, that's usually what I think. I'm like, because that means like I don't have to be.
Right? Right.
I feel
It'll
good about that. Even Stevens.
Exactly. And it ebbs and flows, right? I'm sure she's
Yeah,
not excited about everything.
it's true. It's true. But I was working with another woman who kind of described her workday as constant translation. So at home, she was expressive, she was warm, she was collaborative, and this was probably culturally influenced. But at work, she was very measured and reserved and careful. And she said, I feel like I leave half of myself in the car before I walk into the office.
Mm,
And that kind of resonated with me because I do like my brain totally shifts when I'm in the parking lot and I'm walking from the car to wherever I'm working. And part of that is right. I want to make sure that I'm behaving in a way that is professional or that we would consider professional, right? So there's that shift. But more than that, too, I think what stood out with this woman is that she wasn't just talking about that professional shift or that personality. She was talking about culture.
mhm.
And she had grown up in a collectivist culture or collectivist environment where collaboration and relational awareness are strengths, but in our workplaces in America, that is not necessarily always the case. We very much value individualism, and assertiveness is what's rewarded for the most part. And so she started asking, like, do I need to speak up more? Do I need to soften myself? Do I need to change? Or do I stay authentic? And this is not necessarily just a confidence issue. This is actually an adult development issue. It's the process of making meaning out of those competing expectations that we're faced with every single day.
I know we're going to focus on the adult development part of it and how, we as individuals can address these scenarios that we experience. As you were talking and sharing the second story, I started thinking about leaders. And I know we have leaders on this podcast, whether by title or by choice, that you are a leader in your workplace, but to be cognizant of these things,
Mm.
that there are these cultural differences, and sometimes we can see them, sometimes we can't see them, but just like the awareness around what people are navigating and asking questions and being compassionate or educating ourselves on these things. But we're talking about our individuals and how we personally address these things. So, identity development and meaning at work is what we're really going to focus on. So, adult development theory tells us that as we grow, we move from being shaped by external expectations to defining our own internal values. So, let's break this into practical steps.
So first we're gonna start identifying like what do I believe I should be like at work? And some of those examples, right, take into consideration the environment that you're in and the culture that you're in. I should be more assertive. I should be less emotional. I should fit the culture. And many of these expectations are shaped by dominant workplace norms, which may or may not reflect your own cultural values. I'm thinking now about working locally in other countries and having to adjust to the cultural norms there and they're and having I didn't realize like how much I had integrated individuality and assertiveness into my I guess my persona at work. I won't say persona, but just my behavior at work and recognize that that was not valued in some of those spaces that I was in. And so I think even me, like I had to navigate like what should I be like when I am at work here? And just recognizing that they are shaped by workplace norms. Yeah.
It's really interesting to get curious about what things you maybe naturally have done without even cognizantly thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
So, what parts of myself am I minimizing? Okay, that's another good question. So, what area am I holding back? My communication style, my relational approach, my cultural identity. This is where many women really begin to experience tension, because growth is being mistaken for fitting in. Fitting in is not growth in any way. I guess I shouldn't say it in any way. Um,
It's not authentic growth.
it's not authentic growth.
It's not authentic anything, actually.
Right. Right. Yeah. Fitting in is a whole different conversation. But what are you holding back and minimizing at work that maybe even could be an asset?
Another question to ask is what internal conflict is showing up? So it could be a myriad of things. Values conflict, right? And conflicting values, or even questions or thought we have around showing up. Like if I show up fully, I won't belong, or if I adapt, I'm not being authentic, as we just said before. This is a developmental tension, not a personal flaw. And if you can think back to your early 20s and your emerging adult years, you probably were asking the same questions. If I show up fully, like, or even thinking the same way, if I show up fully, I won't belong. If I adapt, I'm not being authentic, right? So this is a continuation of our development as adults.
Because we are changing and adapting as adults and human beings.
Right.
What meaning am I making of all of this? So here's the key shift. Instead of asking which version is right, you can ask, how can I integrate both? So here are some examples: assertiveness and relational awareness, confidence and cultural humility. You're really not choosing one or the other, you are expanding, creating space for both things.
Which can be so hard because our minds love our binary thinking patterns. And so being able to integrate these is kind of a stretch. It's a stretch. It's growth.
It, it it is to hold two truths that feel like they're opposite at the same time can be really difficult sometimes, and it's really beautiful when it happens.
Hmm. And so then experiment, right? Experiment with the integration. Try this in a real situation. Speak up, but speak up in your natural tone. Share ideas, but stay relational, right? So being aware of the impact that this is having on others and even how others, like others' body language and how they may perceive or receive some of those things. And really being connected to individuals as you're sharing your ideas and bringing your perspective without editing your identity. You're not abandoning professionalism in this situation. You're actually redefining what it means.
Assess the data. After you've done these things, what did you learn? What most women discover is that their differences are actually strengths. Authenticity actually builds trust, and integration creates confidence. And most importantly, you don't have to fragment yourself to succeed.
This is hitting me in real time. I'm thinking about some insecurities I have around some of this. And one of those is so I won't speak for every psychologist, but there is an idea or a perception that psychologists are stoic, and that you do try to bring yourself into the room and into the space, but you are like self-disclosure is kind of frowned on, and anyways, there are these different ways of being in terms of therapy, and I am not any of those. I always bring myself into the space because that is me being genuine and authentic, and that is I feel like I can connect with someone when I am being authentic, when I'm being authentic about my experience, when I'm experiencing that room with someone, or when I'm relating to someone. And it's never in a way that is turns a session into me, but it is in a way that connects. And sometimes I'm just thinking about a couple times in the last little while where I've been asked about that, or that's been pointed out, like bringing myself into the room. And for some people, it feels very refreshing. And for others, I can tell they bristle up against that. And so it's just really interesting because for me, that I feel confident when I am able to be authentic. And I feel like I can establish a good rapport with my clients when I am when I am authentic. And for me that's a strength, but I have noticed how it can be frowned upon too. So just going back to this idea that you don't have to fragment yourself to succeed, you might not be for everybody, and that's okay. Growth isn't necessarily about becoming who the workplace expects or who the profession expects in those ways. It's about developing the capacity to define who you are within that, right? So I still try to maintain my professionalism and I still try to make sure that my interventions are tailored towards the needs of my client. But it's also really important for me to integrate myself. And so I hope that resonates with someone. Thanks for listening. Remember, speak clearly and listen bravely. When you feel confident in your communication, everything changes.
We'd love to hear your wins, failures, and insights on Instagram at Communication Skills for Women. Leave a review and connect with us.
Until next time, speak clearly and listen bravely.